April 5th, 2015. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon. It's a mix of sun and clouds today, about 60 degrees. Gonna go in these 3 hives for the first time this year, just do a moderate inspection. A little breezy today. Hopefully the wind won't bug the microphone, but really all I'm looking for is to see how they're set up for stores. We're not into the nectar flow, although I do see them bringing in some pollen right now. And there's a little bit of forage out there in the way of crocus, snowdrops, maybe some skunk cabbage, some buds on the trees. We saw them today working on some of the plants around, but for the most part, it's still pretty barren and brown here. I see a lot of bees above me doing orientation flights, and we're gonna go take a look. I put some fondant on this hive a little bit earlier, about 3 weeks ago. I wanna see how much they have left and see where the cluster is and how big it is. There were some stores left in this box from winter, and the cluster was right in the top box here, so let's see what we have. I'm gonna give them a little smoke. I would expect their temperament's gonna be pretty decent, but just because I'm gonna put my veil on here. So there's my answer. The cluster is literally right here on the roof, and all the food that I've given them, they have eaten almost all of it. And I don't need to go any further. I'm actually gonna go get some more, put it right up on here, and go ahead and feed them some more. Let me bring you over and show you what's there. I put fondant all the way across in this ring on the top, and they've consumed almost all of it. You see the one piece, they have it down to just sugar crystals pretty much here. And the other parts in the back are still whole. So they're hungry and they're eating what I've provided them. So I'm gonna give them some more. And that's about it. I didn't want to disturb this hive going into winter. It was still really cold. It was 30 something last night. So I just put this ring on here. It's an emery shim over top of the inner cover so that I would have space to put my fondant down. On the box over there, the third one, you'll see there's a green stripe. They were down in the bottom to second box, and I put the feeder there. Okay, here you can see I've given them a little more sugar. I had some fondant made up, and now I'm gonna cover them off. Still a little bit too cool to go inside this hive. I don't want to crack the seals. I'm not planning on doing any manipulations this week anyway, so next week, week after, I'll go in, start looking at making splits or doing whatever I'm going to do for this hive. But you can see by the number of bees here that this thing is probably getting set to try and get to a swarm state. I think they're still lacking a little food out in the universe, but they're doing good on the fondant, so we'll let them keep at work. Okay, time to take a look at this second hive, see what's going on. I looked earlier today, there's pollen coming and going at the entrance. Bees orienting over the flight, or orienting over the hive. Have no bees up at the top. There's another feeding shim right here, you can see, underneath the inner cover. And this one, the cluster is right up here. If I look, 1, 2, 3, between 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and maybe 8. So 4, 5, 6, 7, that's where the cluster is located. There's food up here on the top, and there's still actually quite a bit left. Not a big cluster, but not a terrible cluster either. And again, they're eating all this food. They've got more left than the other one. They don't need to be fed. Looking at the bees, they look good. Not interested in me. Small bees. So I'm not going to mess. I let their heat out. Let me put them back together. Again, this hive is a little light, so I'm glad that they're doing okay with the food I gave them. Close it up. That's all I need to see. This time of year, I don't want to be spending a lot of time inside. It's bad enough I opened them up and let all their heat out. So, less is more. All right, let's go check number 3. Interesting thing about this hive, you see a lot of bees right up at the front entrance, circling. They're all doing orientation flights. I saw them come out of this hive. Every once in a while you see a hive where all of a sudden all the bees exit. They just all decided at the time it's a good one, good time to go, and they're out and they're flying circles overhead and around this hive, getting oriented to it. So I'm going to take a look. As you see, I have a green box or green feeder right through the middle. That's what this emery shim is right here. So the food was placed between these two boxes, and I'm going to give it a look. I put a lot of smoke in there, but it's so windy today that hardly any of it's getting through to the hive. Tilt it up a little bit so you can see me. All right, let's take a look and see what we have going on in here. Primarily, I'm just looking to see if they have any fondant left and if they need any, and how much they've eaten. Inner cover is stuck to the outer cover, and I can't see anything in this box, but I can tell you it seems awful light. There may be a little bit of honey left in this, but not much. In fact, I'm probably going to take this off. I see the cluster between 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe over to 6. And the food, they haven't touched it. Don't want anything to do with it, apparently. I'm going to put it over top of the cluster, and I'm going to button it up. Now I can see they have some honey stores in these last 3 frames over here. This last one is empty, but they have a little reserve honey in here, so that's probably why they have not eaten the fondant in any way. But I'm going to leave it on here, and I'm going to leave them go, and we'll see this cluster build down into the top box. Inner cover back on, outer cover. Now the interesting thing is this box had honey in this top box, and it's empty right now. Let me pop a couple frames, show you what I mean. I could get them out of here. They're all propolis together. Now one thing I can tell you about this is I hate these frames, and I'll show you why. Totally empty, nothing in them. And this box had honey all the way through. These grooves are terrible for small hive beetle. They love these grooves. If you ever buy frames that look like this, where you slide the foundation in from the top, make sure you seal these with some sort of silicone. So I could see to the next frame and the next one and the next one. This entire box is empty now. So whatever they had left in this honey box, they've consumed the whole thing. So there's no sense in it being on there, and they could stay warmer if I consolidate this down to 2. Now about this last hive. Interesting, isn't it? What's going on in here? This hive is dead. There's nothing in it. Although I just saw somebody go in here with pollen on their legs. That's very interesting. So let's take this thing apart and see what's going on in here. I think I know the answer is that there's extra stores in here and they're so hungry that they're raiding this out. I'm not going to smoke it because I know this hive is dead. So here I could show you, this is what remains what was this hive. And you can see there's where the cluster was. And it did not survive. There is pollen inside these frames, and I can see that stuff has been chewed up. So it could be that's what they're after. And these bees are starting to mold a little bit. So there's nothing in this hive. That was the old cluster. Let me see what they're after in here. I see no live bees in this top box. So there must be something left for them down in the bottom that they keep exploring. And it could be just that, they're exploring it. There's no weight whatsoever to this top box. So what are they after in here? Are they just wasting their time? There's a lot of pollen left in here, I see, and that could be what they're after. This is right underneath where the cluster was, and you can see some of the cluster from the previous hive that didn't survive the winter is located right underneath it. There's some of them right there with what's left of the brood. And they're actually covered by cappings, which means that the bees before were chewing through. And as I look at the bottom, there's all cappings all underneath on the bottom board. So whatever they raided out of this hive came out of that top box where the honey was stored next to where the cluster was living. And there's nothing in here. So I don't know what these girls are interested in. They're probably just taking a peek. This box has been totally emptied. And it's probably just the odor that's drawing them in. Let me see if I can pop this off the bottom board. Yeah, there's nothing for them to find here. There's a lot of bees down here on the bottom. It's a shame this colony didn't survive. I'm not sure why. Let me see if I can find any mites. There's a couple interesting observations here. First one is, that's a reasonable number of bees. The question is, why couldn't they have kept themselves warm? It was a brutally warm or brutally cold winter. So what else was going on here? Now the cluster was right here in this frame. You can see this is where the cluster fell off. They've got a little white on them because they've started to, I guess, mildew from having been set in here. They certainly had enough pollen, as you could probably see. They were loaded with pollen right next to the brood. The other thing that you note is they had honey right here. This is all shredded from bees coming in and robbing this hive after it died. So if you look on the bottom board, you're going to see what's left of what they shredded off and uncapped. So here you had a brood cluster, small one, but presumably all those bees were on it, and they had pollen and nectar next door, and they still didn't survive. So now the question is, what happened to them? Why couldn't they keep themselves warm? Is it possible that there were a varroa mite problem in this hive? So as I look across the bottom board, I do see some varroa in here. There's one right there. I know it's hard to see amongst all the specks. There are some in here. Let me see if I can dig one out and make it obvious. It's pretty tough in here with the wind blowing every time I move something. There's a varroa right there, if you could see it. I'll try and get close to it. So there's varroa mite in here. The other thing that I found in here is this. This guy's a hive beetle. But there's only a handful of them that have overwintered in here that have died with the bees. So I don't suspect that they were any sort of problem. Now as I look through here, I see a varroa there. I think that's one, yep. I see one right there. I see one there and there. And so one of the things, there's one right there, very clear one to see. And there's one right there. So what's that telling me? This is the one hive out of the hives that I had that I did not treat. And it's pretty clear that it was loaded with varroa. And the question is, were these bees sick? Did they die before winter was over? It was a brutal winter. You have to speculate that it has to be with the varroa. I'm not sure about lack of stores, but if the bees died from varroa and then the cluster got really small, it doesn't matter how much was available to them. So that's just a quick post-mortem on this hive. I could probably take these bees, put them in alcohol wash, shake them, and see how many varroa I get out of them, but I'm pretty sure by what I see on the bottom board that I know the answer. And so the answer is next year, treat the bees. Or this is, if you're a treatment-free person, this is what you're after, right? The varroa killed this hive and the other one survived. And if you prescribe to that idea, then this is nature running its course. So hopefully you found this helpful.